Town of North Smithfield Planning Board meeting for Thursday, December 11th is called to order at 7:02. First on the agenda, roll call, Dr. Benoit.
Here.
Dr. Roberts.
Here.
Mr. Porter.
Here.
Ms. Menard.
Here.
Our newest member, Mr. Hammond.
Here.
And the chair is here. Next, we have the minutes, right? Is everybody comfortable reviewing the minutes tonight? Okay. We did get them late.
I wasn't present at the meeting, so I can't.
Oh, okay, but I'm just saying, all right?
Yeah.
So, any comments on the
No.
meetings? Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the November 13th, 2025 meeting minutes as presented.
Vote, second.
Second.
We have a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No. Meeting minutes for November 13th are approved as presented. Does anyone have, any planning board members have anything to disclose about potential conflicts before the board this evening? No. Hearing none. Any board members have to need to disclose any ex parte communications about any contested or material adjudicated facts or opinions on the merits of any application before the board this evening? Nope. Hearing none. So our voting members will be Dr. Benoit, Dr. Roberts, Mr. Porter, Ms. Menard, and myself. And with that, Mr. Carullo, if you could give us an introduction so we can get started.
Mr. Chairman, board members, you may recall that the application for the zoning amendment for Pound Hill Realty LLC was initially before this board back in February. There was substantial testimony and presentation made at that time. That meeting was continued to March. There was a second presentation of testimony, then continued to April, and in April there was an agreement between the applicant and the board to continue indefinitely while the applicant went back and was working with the town council, having its public hearings, and now they're back before the planning board. I think they're going to be back before the council on Monday for a recommendation for the zone change. So we're picking up where we left off. Now, in the interim, the council directed the applicant, or requested that the applicant participate in a peer review. The town hired GZA Engineering to perform the peer review. This evening, we have Mr. Tony Urbano from GZA here to go give a brief review of the report. I think you all received a copy of the report. And at that point, he'll be available for questions, and I believe that the applicant would likely want to give some sort of remarks following the presentation by Mr. Urbano.
Okay. Yep, great, thank you. So, Mr. Urbano, you up first?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, just go up there, introduce yourself. Yes, thank you.
I am Tony Urbano of GZA. We were hired basically by the town to perform a peer review of previous, go ahead.
Could we maybe get the microphone a little bit closer to you? Is it on, CJ? Okay, great.
Is it on?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. All right. We were hired by the town to perform a peer review of the previous testimony. Was mostly just looking at YouTube videos of the testimony that was provided back in March and April or something like that. We reviewed that information. I went out and visited the site. We reviewed other geologic information that we had. There was some information that they had regarding the two nearby Superfund sites. One is Western Sand and Gravel, which is abutting the site. The other one is LR&R, which is about, I think, 1,300 feet northeast of the site. We reviewed that information that was available in the public. And then we put together our report, which is summarized in the October 6, 2025 report. Our opinion was generally, we agreed with the testimony provided by the experts. We provided some recommendations. I mean, there were some areas of concern, but we provided some recommendations in the end of our report. And then I've noticed that you've incorporated a lot of that information. I think the There was some recommendations that they have that the town planning board should include, or that you'd recommend. I think there's like bullet points, 1 through 12, whatnot, that seem to incorporate all those things. Generally, those are, I think consistent with our findings, our report. I do have a couple of, I guess, thoughts after I looked at that and compared it to our report. One of them was I think, bullet point 6. It requires to follow the North Smithfield extraction earth products for certain things, and which is a creation of a restoration plan. And I would just recommend that as part of that restoration plan, they evaluate final grades. This is like a deep rock cut. Rock cut faces can be relatively steep, but there will be exposed gravel faces, which should be properly faced for stability purposes and stuff like that. So as long as that, they include that in the restoration plan. And then sections 9, 10, and 11 refer to basically there's still some areas of concern, and the hydrologic consultant should be further evaluate that. So far, there's no impact, and it's likely that they can proceed without any adverse impacts, but it shouldn't be just proceeded without any forethought and whatnot. One of the things that we mentioned in our report was a mine plan. It would basically, in order to evaluate the impacts on like potential water supply or private water supply wells in the area and stuff like that, it's going to be a function of what the bottom elevation of the rock quarry is going to be. So I would recommend that they provide some type of a plan that would determine how deep they would go in different areas of the site, and then that way the hydrogeologic consultant can be specific to that, whether that specific plan would be okay, basically. So, and then the other one was the section 10. You had the hydrologic consultant evaluate like the western, depending on how deep they were going to go, areas I think in the southwestern portion of the site. And there's just a reference to, it says impacts on nearby residential water supply wells, which is important, but it says to report that information to the EPA. I would recommend that they report that information to the town. The EPA would be concerned on the impacts on western sand and gravel, but they would not have their focus would not be whether, what the development would be impacting the yield of water supply wells in the area. And that's somewhat covered in section 11. There's a recommendation to install some monitoring wells to evaluate trends, but that section 11, I believe, should refer to the hydrologic consultant, and he should just be able to provide the opinion that the proposed development as laid out in the mine plan would not have impact to yield of water supply wells. All this stuff is workable. It's just, the question is how deep they're gonna go. Right now, they're about 50 feet below the water table and the portion. If they go 100 feet, could be more impacts. If they go 200, so put a limit and then you could provide that opinion. And that could be even flexible. It doesn't have to be, it could change with time, but it has to start out with some type of an opinion so you'd feel confident that the residential water supply wells aren't going to be impacted, particularly the yield. The water quality is unlikely to be impacted. It's more likely if they go very deep, and if they're very close to if a residential well is very close to where they're excavating, there's the potential of whether they could affect the yield of that well. That's kind of big picture stuff, so if you have any specific questions, I guess I could address that.
Any questions from the board? I have one from your report. It's on page 14, number 12, because, you list a bunch of recommendations.
Yep.
But item 12 talks about dust. It says dust is controlled at the site by paving, blah, blah. It doesn't actually make a recommendation. It's just sort of factually stating, like, how dust can be controlled. so I'm not sure what the recommendation is with this. Are there unpaved areas that you say should be paved? I mean, that's what I'm trying to get to.
I mean, it's all a function, I mean, let's see, where is that?
Page 14,
Page 14,
item 12, it's near the bottom of the page.
item 12. Yeah, the dust control. I mean, the dust control is, there should be a plan, usually dropping water down on the road is the thing that controls dust for the most part. It's only if an area would be really prevalently, the dust control was not working, that you might want to consider paving. Usually it's just like the main entrances. You're not going to pave the whole site, obviously. So, but it's really it should be a flexible plan. But I mean, basically, they cannot have air emissions leave the property line, and that's the ultimate thing. So if there's ever a concern, you just want to be able to make sure that they're following a plan that would prevent that from happening, and that's
So that would be part of the mine plan.
yeah. The dust control plan, I think, pollution control plan. Yeah.
Mr. Carrillo, would that be something we add into the stipulations then?
That might be covered, I'm not sure, but I would defer to Tony that number 3, item air control regulation 250 RICR 125-5, we have one particular matter, including dust control mitigation plan consistent with industry standard.
Yeah, actually, I thought I read it somewhere, just,
Number 3, I think.
you guys have
Would
that
that
recommendation.
cover that, this specific thing about paving and sweeping and?
That's the dust control plan.
Okay, all right. Just want to make sure it's covered. Thank you.
Okay,
Dr. Roberts?
thank you. One of my questions is, I noticed in the report, in the peer review that you did, that it talks about silica as it's dangerous to workers in the quarry, and I'm really glad that workers are protected, of course. And I know that in our community, many people, especially people who live close to the quarry, are concerned about the silica dust. And I was curious, I didn't really see anything in the report talking about standards or measures about how we know whether silica dust that may be being spread is harmful to the neighbors and at what levels. Because I know like people have complained about having dust on their, picnic tables in their backyard, on their cars, et cetera. But I just didn't see anything mentioned about potential harms to residents and like what those standards are.
Yeah, I mean, well, so the silica would be part of the dust, so it's part of that dust mitigation plan. So that goes right to that specific, the condition you have for number 3 there is following a dust control mitigation plan. And if there is evidence of dust migrating, there should be corrective actions that be made basically anytime. 'Cause, I mean, they can affect their operations, they could add more water or something like that,
And-
or.
And that
yeah.
goes back to your statement that no dust is supposed to leave the property, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because is a question that I have, which is, it seems to me from what I've seen over the last few years, that when people who do live near there have complained about the dust, it seems like that hasn't been taken seriously, and that maybe it's been said that they shouldn't be worrying about it. So if you're saying that the silica is in that dust, I would just like it on the record that it matters that residents are finding that on their cars and their backyard porches and things.
Which means it's
Yeah.
leaving the
Well,
property.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where I think we said that basically they are protecting their workers from it, and they would be the first line of defense. So if they're protecting their workers, going above and beyond that point, it's going to be super protective and therefore extremely unlikely that anything can
As long as it's
happen.
not leaving the property. You can protect workers with masks and other things
Yes.
too. You can't stop stuff from leaving the property with a mask. So those are,
Yeah.
they're related, but they're different things.
Yes, yeah. And it's how deep they are into the excavation and stuff like that. So.
I do have another question.
Go ahead.
It's about the mine plan that you recommended. And I was curious, based on the review that you did, is there current, so there's like so many technical pieces and so many regulations and different bodies that oversee them. And that was one of the things that I found to be really overwhelming to try and review everything.
Yep.
So I was curious, as far as a mine plan goes, is it then the case that currently there is no mine plan and everything is just like lots of fragmented things, but not all brought together by a plan?
Well, our recommendation for the Montan is really specific to evaluate what are the potential future impacts from the thing. And really, it's the bottom elevation. There is no defined, they're down a certain depth right now, but there's no limit on how they can go deep. They can continue to go deep as long as there's no impact, but there has to be have a plan to go to a certain depth and then evaluate it. And then at that point, they could reevaluate it, determine if you can go deeper or something. And the question is just like they're mining certain areas. I think the middle of the site is really sand and gravel, but then kind of the northeast and the southwest corners are rock areas. So the question is, how deep are they going to go in those areas? So once they've defined what the bottom elevation would be, then you could make an evaluation of, how well. I mean, if they don't go below the water table, you don't even have to evaluate whether they're going to impact private wells. But if they're going to go certain, different differences, 50 feet or 100 feet below the water table, that would potentially have different radiuses that might be areas of concern and whatnot.
So I don't think I heard a definitive answer for Dr. Roberts' question. Is there a mining plan in place?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Do you have anything else? Okay. One other thing we mentioned the site mitigation, I guess. You were talking about the rock faces and they have to become stabilized. What about just in general? I mean, this could be left, I think of the mine that's off of Route 99, which is comfortably more than 40 feet high. Of course, that's still in operation.
Yes.
Once it's not in operation anymore, doesn't that pose a safety risk for, I mean,
Yep.
I know what I like to do at 14 years old, going exploring in the woods, so what is the appropriate plan for that?
I believe they're going to have to submit the restoration plan. It's one of the conditions.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be basically set. And I believe there's a plan for a fence around the property. I didn't, I'm pretty sure there was a requirement for a fence. And then, and I've just brought up is that I noticed there are, because different rock materials versus sand and gravel, they have different slopes. Rock can be relatively steep, but sand and gravel, you're already incorporated some of the impacts by requiring a 200-foot setback. So you have an area, but you just don't want a failure that's going to go off of a property line or something. Right. And that's a pretty good setback right there, but it's just something should be considered just so they know where the final, so you'll excavate to a point and then they'll stop excavating so you can maintain those final.
Mr. Crowe, what's the timing on having, for example, the mining plan, the restoration plan in place?
So the next step after the planning board will make a recommendation to the council, and I would advise the board whether they recommend positively or negatively that they include these stipulations to forward them to the council. The council will determine the timing, Mr. Chairman, because there's a request for a zone change here. As part of that process, that zone change process, they should dictate the timing in that basically once the zone change will take 2 passages. It goes to the council for first passage and then a second passage, and there's a 20-day appeal period. But with regard to the plan, with the mining plan and whatnot, that is not determined in here, that they would have to provide that. So I would expect that the council would determine when they would want that plan in place. It doesn't exist currently, so there would have to be some lead time for them to produce these.
And therefore,
plans.
it'd be up to the town council whether that's a mitigating on it. In other words, we can't move forward to this without these plans in place, something like that.
Well,
plans approved, I should say.
So typically stipulations are in effect, right? So when the zone change takes place, should a zone change take place, then stipulations go into effect. There'll be, the council could attach a performance period to that for certain elements of it. I would expect some of the elements, like a fence or something like that, would be required almost immediately as part of the zone change being in effect. They have to perform.
Okay. Would it make sense for us to put that in stipulations?
If that's your prerogative, whatever the timing would take to do something like that, 30,
Yes.
60, 90 days, 6 months,
Consider that a yes.
I'm not a mining expert. Maybe that would be a question we could ask Mr. Urbano about, what's a reasonable amount of time?
Well, I'm not saying the specific amount of time necessarily. I don't think that's necessary.
Oh,
for us
okay, I
to-
understood.
But just saying, put
Sorry.
it in the stipulations that this must be done, prior to whatever, let the town council work out whatever the appropriate time frame is. Is that reasonable? Everybody seems good with that? Okay, so you can add that to your lengthy list. All right. Anything else, Dr. Roberts?
I think we're having other opportunities to discuss other aspects, right? 'Cause- all right.
Sure.
And if we have questions as they unfold, can we re-ask Mr. Urbano? Because I
course.
might have some more questions.
Of course.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
I would just like to remind not only ourselves, but everybody watching here tonight, that our duties this evening, we have a few, to determine if this zoning ordinance or overlay is consistent with the comp plan, and please correct me if I'm wrong. That's our main duty for this evening, right? Is to determine the consistency with the comp plan. And then also make the recommendations to town council one way or the other as far as stipulations go, and potentially any other recommendations we may have, and considering with their duties as the town council to pass or not this ordinance that's before us, correct?
So your primary duty is to make a determination whether the request is in compliance or not in compliance with the comprehensive plan. If it is in compliance, the assumption is that it would be an affirmative recommendation to the council to approve the zone change. Otherwise, you would be inconsistent with your finding and your recommendation.
Sure.
If you find that it's not compliant, then in effect, you would be recommending that the council not approve it. You need to be consistent in your
Sure.
finding,
Right.
in your recommendation.
But there's been times where we've made recommendations to the council one way, and they decide the opposite way.
Well, they are the legislative
Yeah.
body, and it is their prerogative.
And that's
what
their
they-
prerogative, but
Yes.
if we decide, in one direction, but then also forward along those stipulations regardless of how we decide.
That's why I agree, and that's why I'm recommending, regardless of what your recommendation is, that you would forward a list of stipulations for their consideration.
Yep.
Should they decide to approve the zone change.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification.
Okay. So perhaps open up the hearing? Open up the public hearing?
Am I all set, or?
I think you're all set for now. Thank you. I thought we did. Of course, it'd be helpful if I was looking at the correct,
Gary,
we did, yes, Dr. Benoit.
all right. We would ask Mr. Carullo if he would go over the comprehensive plan aspects.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I provided to the planning board a chapter-by-chapter analysis of those areas that, in my opinion, reviewing it as the planner and working on behalf of the planning board, those areas that would directly relate or relate to the request at hand. When I went through the comprehensive plan, just to be clear, there is no specific recommendation one way or the other. The comprehensive plan does not say within it that mining shall be prohibited in the town of North Smithfield, period. So as I go through each chapter, I was reading it in totality, and I was finding areas that may or may not pertain to the request, that may or may not be in favor of the request. And these, as a comprehensive plan, is a general policy document, and many times it can be read one way or the other. my preference was to look at it, do an analysis, and make a very more or less neutral determination, because there's really no, like, as I said, there's really no definitive opinion within that comprehensive plan whether this is consistent or isn't consistent. So that being said, in the land use chapter on page 15, goals and policies and actions, page 15, it says the rural estate designation, low density, and that's basically what this area is zoned. The REA area covers land, groundwater, aquifer areas requiring conservation action. The reason I brought that up is that's what this area is zoned, and that's what the comprehensive plan says. It says all sensitive areas where utilities should not be provided and open space should be preserved. The designated area has also been established as a buffer district around, along Trout Brook, Trout Pond, Dolly Pond. This is where the REA is located, and the Slatersville reservoirs. It is proposed that the buffer be increased to include portions of the reservoir drainage area, Slatersville aquifer, and aquifer recharge area. This is an aquifer area in this particular area. In the reservoirs in Pound Hill Road, the area encompasses the landfill and resource recovery of Western Sand and EPA Superfund sites. So it refers to this general area. It doesn't really define, you know, what the buffers are and or what that means. Development proposals must consider the constraints associated with the existence of the EPA Superfund sites and the need to protect the Slatersville Aquifer Reservoir. So my opinion is the description of the REA presented above represents the town's concern about the existence of a groundwater aquifer, Slatersville Reservoir, and the presence of contaminated Superfund sites. This section of the plan calls for open space, enhanced buffers, in consideration of constraints to development related to the Superfund sites in the REA district. However, there is no specific mention of what constitutes an adequate buffer and what qualifies as appropriate land uses other than open space. So to me, it's inconclusive. Goal number 3, which is table 3, goal number 3, prevent incompatible non-residential land uses in residential neighborhoods. That's reasonably clear to me. When reviewing the goals, policies, and actions of the land use chapter, table 3, number 4, goal 3 above, it appears to be the most direct statement in conflict with the proposed zoning amendment. Location of a sand and gravel quarrying operation directly abutting a residential land use is indicative of incompatible land use condition. However, the sand and gravel operation in some configuration is a pre-existing condition which predates the current zoning and adoption of the comprehensive plan. Should a proposal for a new sand and gravel operation be presented, it would clearly be incompatible with table 3, number 4, goal 3. So basically what I'm saying is, in a world where we're looking at new development and compatibility, to introduce a quarrying operation next to a residential neighborhood would be an incompatible land use. I think that's pretty clear. However, this is a pre-existing condition. The quarry was there before the comprehensive plan was adopted. I won't get into my thoughts on that, but the fact that there was a quarry there and then someone rezoned this area residential and said don't introduce incompatible land uses, there could be an argument that the introduction of residential next to a quarry was an introduction of an incompatible land use next to a quarry. Economic development chapter, following excerpts from the economic development chapter not directly related to the proposed zone change, but may be related. Page 43, detailed build-out of all non-residential zoning districts was performed using GIS and discussed later in the chapter, the section non-residential build-out analysis. The findings confirm North Smithfield has very little undeveloped commercially zoned property remaining. As a result, the town must consider both flexibility in its subdivision and land development process to encourage development of remaining industrially zoned land, along with potential zone changes to add to the zone's industrial base, the town's industrial base. Such will likely require cooperation between the planning and zoning boards and subdivision developments. This section of the economic development chapter states a need for more commercially zoned land. The chapter suggests flexibility to encourage development of remaining industrial zone land as well as potential zone changes to add to the industrial base. While this section supports new and expanded industrial activity, it is the town's responsibility to determine the most appropriate areas and type of activities that are most suitable for proposed expansion and rezoning. Again, this is a request to allow the continuation of an existing use. If this was a request for a new industrial use in an area that's adjacent to a residential neighborhood, I would say it's incompatible. However, it's a pre-existing use. The town does need expansion of its commercial base and industrial base. This is an existing business that's looking to continue. So from one aspect of it, the business is a benefit to the community because it's providing a tax base and lessening the burden on residential. However, it's an incompatible land use abutting a residential neighborhood. Financial, again, in the economic development section, financial review, basics and trends. North Smithfield revenue is dominated by residential tax base. The commercial tax revenue has been growing, which helps mitigate the burden to residents. However, the delta between the commercial and residential is nearly identical to that 2006. It tells us that reliance on residential revenue versus that of commercial revenue has not made progress. It would appear that the reliance gap shrank between 2011 and 2012. However, as a result of the post-2008 recession, residential values are rebounding. The structural reliance has not changed. We must address, these are excerpts out of the comprehensive plan. We must address the challenge increasing revenue from commercial tax bases to meet the town's financial needs without raising residential taxes, in addition to creating local jobs to the greatest extent possible. So these are all excerpts that are in favor of commercial and expanding commercial uses. The expansion of this tax base is critical to the community's success in stabilizing the residential tax base and controlling the cost of living for its residents and generating tax revenues to fund quality municipal services, the most demanding of which is public education. Expanding the commercial tax base also allows the commercial base to be low, which in turn attracts businesses. This section, this is my analysis, this section emphasizes the town's reliance on the residential tax base and expresses the need to expand the commercial tax base to provide necessary municipal services for town residents, in particular funding of the education system. It also articulates the idea of the compounding effect of business attracting business and supports new and expanded industrial activity. However, as previously stated, it's the town's responsibility to determine the most appropriate types of business activities that are suitable for the town and the location. I think that speaks for itself.
So, Mr. Carrillo, if I could make a
Yes.
comment on that. So this and to some extent the previous section on economic development, this is not about creating an overlay district that will attract new businesses. In fact, we specifically are pointing out that at least any new mining business would be incompatible and therefore not allowed. So it seems to me this is really about allowing one business to continue and expand, but that's
Correct.
all it is. And we have precedent in this town, unfortunately. We have experience at creating overlay districts to benefit a single business, and they're not positive experiences. So I'm wondering, without the overlay, isn't this business still going to be able to, perhaps with some town council approval, to expand and continue, and therefore make more money, probably pay more taxes, et cetera, but without the overlay, without creating an overlay that is specific to their business?
I think I would defer to our solicitor. There's pending litigation. The applicant has been directed to come back to the town and try to resolve the issue. They've been cited by the town. The town, I'm not sure exactly what the citation is. I didn't read it recently, but basically, I think the claim is that they have been expanding their use in violation of the local zoning ordinance.
Right.
So the simple answer to that question is the town has taken a position that it believes they're not able to expand. They've taken that position to court. That is being litigated currently. That has been suspended while the applicant comes to the town and is trying to present to the town an option that would allow them to continue to do their business and expand their business on their property. So,
But what I'm saying is, is this the only option? Isn't there an option
Well-
for the town council to simply say, you can expand and continue? We'll put stipulations on and all that stuff on how that expansion will occur and be regulated, but without creating some new special overlay just for one business.
well, there could have been other options. I mean, there was an option to apply to the zoning board for relief and allow an expansion. There's an option to create this overlay. There's an option to just amend the zoning ordinance to allow mining in the, there are multiple options. This is the option that the
Okay.
applicant chose to come with. But
Absolutely,
they could have come back and said, hey, change your use table to put a yes for mining. Right now,
Sure.
It says no across the board. So
Right.
to answer your question, there are multiple options. This is the mechanism to get them before the town council to consider the option that they are proposing. And the council can approve or not approve that. I'd have to defer to the solicitor whether the council has the ability to allow them to continue to do business and expand when the town has taken the position that they're in violation of zoning. I'm not sure that that's something that would be before them currently.
I think the board needs to focus on the application before them and not options that are not presented. This is the option that the applicant filed and requested you to act on. Everybody's trying to speculate about what other choices they should make. This is
No.
their choice.
My
I'm just saying. so
comment wasn't to speculate on options they could take. Understood, this is what they chose to take. What I wanted to do, frankly, is to make sure that they still have the option to expand, even if we say no or give a negative recommendation. We're not trying to shut them down. We're not trying to prevent that. What I'm really concerned with is just that creating an overlay district for a single business again.
Well,
I think we should get out of that business
The simple
as a
answer to your
town.
question is if you recommend no, the council can still say yes. There's the simple answer to your question.
Well, they can say, in which case they're saying yes to the overlay district, of course, right?
And you can make a
Okay.
recommendation no, the council can still say yes. That's what's before the
Okay.
council.
Okay.
So there are multiple
Fair enough.
options that the applicant could take to get this relief. This is the one they chose.
Gotcha.
You make a recommendation, but your recommendation is just that, so it could still be a positive decision for them by the council.
Okay.
If you want to make a recommendation that you support it, but not this way, certainly that the council could consider that as a vote. We approve it, but not this way. If that's your
Meaning we approve the expansion.
Right.
But just not this way.
not this
I
way.
got you.
If that's what you're getting at, you could certainly do that.
Okay, there you go. Thank you. All right. Sorry to derail you there, Mr. Carullo.
That's fine, Mr. Chairman.
It's what I do. It's what I do.
I understand your question.
I have a quick question on the financial impacts. Have we seen any proposals on what this is going to do in terms of tax revenue since we will be creating a new zoning district for it?
No. Tax revenue is really not something that the planning board takes under consideration. It's more land use, whether this land use is compatible, whether the land use is consistent with the comprehensive plan. Tax revenue is really not something for the planning board to be considering. That might be something that the town council considers, but it's really not in the planning board's purview.
I wanted to add, because I was going to ask this at some point tonight, I have asked the company to provide tax information when we had them present other times, and I haven't seen that. I don't know if it's been provided. And I understand you're saying it's not our purview. And I think when we're talking about a business's benefit or risk to a community, and like their compatibility with these things that we're deciding, I do think what they contribute tax-wise does factor into whether they're a good business to have in our community and be allowed to expand. And I might be speaking out of turn, but it says right in our comprehensive plan. It says right in our comprehensive plan that we're trying to expand the tax base. So if we're not seeing taxes come in from a particular business that's asking to expand, to me, there is a relationship there. Maybe not technically, but qualitatively, I feel like there is.
I agree. I think it's, you're weighing multiple things, and it's just something that has weight. That's all. You know, if you say, yeah, we want to do all this stuff, and it's going to create, one part-time job, oh, that's great.
So,
You know,
so typically when a development comes before the planning board, if there's an analysis, it's called a fiscal impact analysis. And that does a comparison between the cost of the services to whatever the development is to the town versus the taxes. It doesn't talk about, would I allow this because of the taxes, which is, there's a difference there. And that if there's going to be a negative impact on the town, as far as a service or something like that, then the town can impose some sort of a fee or something. They would have to resolve whatever the impact is going to be on the community. Like if it was going to cause the town to have to widen the road or build a school, then there could be an impact fee that or an impact that they would have to resolve moving forward. But really, as far as not to be argumentative with the board, but as far as land use and determining whether there's a financial benefit to that, I mean, the taxes are the taxes, and the businesses pay taxes based on assessment or based on whatever the tax assessor determines that to be.
Okay. I think there was one more section to your, at least one more section to the comprehensive plan analysis. The natural resource. Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right, non-residential build-out, I think is where I interrupted you.
Well, basically, to sum, the economic development element, obviously, the emphasis on promoting economic development within the community, expanding business and increasing the business tax base to take some of the burden off of the residential taxpayer. So continuing a business or expanding a business, to address that somewhat, will provide tax revenue to the community, and that provides relief to the residential tax base. That's basically the finding of the economic development element. Now we're into the natural resources chapter, page 72.
Mr. Carullo.
Yes.
If I may, though, before we leave the economic development, one of the goals that are listed in the economic development, goal 3, is strive to balance economic development and preservation of towns' natural resources and open spaces. So that one, to me, feels like it's, again, a gray area that potentially is conflicting with what's before us tonight, too. That was just one of the things that I had, when we had initially started going through that, this process, part of that economic development goal seems to be, in this overlay district, seem to be at odds with one another.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Crowell, if you want to move into the natural resources.
Sure. Groundwater is so page 72, natural resources discusses groundwater. That has been a topic of conversation for this development. Groundwater is an important resource as it supplies drinking water for a large percentage of the town's households. North Smithfield has 2 Class GAA groundwater aquifers, the Slatersville and Lower Branch. Groundwater classified GAA are those groundwater resources that are known and presumed to be suitable for drinking water without treatment. Map 5, number 1, groundwater aquifer protection overlay from the Town of North Smithfield zoning ordinance. This map combined with the North Smithfield zoning ordinance section 6.19 regulates the use and development of land to protect major stratified drift aquifers and their recharge areas. While much of the town's more intense residential, commercial, industrial development has been historically located over aquifers, ordinances have been put in place specifying permitted uses and non-permitted, possibly contaminating uses to protect drinking water in North Smithfield's residents. Groundwater overlay zoning, the town responded to the 1992 comprehensive plan requirement for groundwater protection by adopting 6.19 of the zoning ordinance regulation of groundwater aquifer zones, groundwater recharge areas, wellhead protection areas, and water supply basin. As recommended by the comprehensive plan, the regulations dictating uses over these resources are more stringent than the underlying districts. The National Resources chapter includes and emphasizes the protection of the town's groundwater resources. The chapter includes mapping of the sensitive areas and expresses a desire to control land use in these areas and to develop more stringent regulations for these areas. It should be noted that the subject property is included in the water supply protection overlay district and does not necessarily preclude the existing land use. However, the use should comply with the standards and provisions requirements of the water supply protection overlay. I think the engineer talking about contamination of the groundwater and putting a mining plan together kind of addresses that element where the use itself would not be contaminating the groundwater, but it could affect the capacity of wells in proximity to the development. I think rather than just going through all of that, I would go to the planning office recommendation towards the end. It says the town's comprehensive plan does not specifically address the proposed zoning text amendments. However, there are several sections of the comprehensive plan that may be appropriate when reviewing the proposed zoning amendments. The land use chapter explains the purpose of the REA zoning designation, which is where this use is located, is to protect and preserve environmentally sensitive areas of the town by proposing low-intensity land use. Goal 3 of the land use chapter calls for preventing the establishment of incompatible non-residential uses in residential neighborhoods. If the request was to allow a new sand and gravel quarry business on the subject property, one could argue that the proposal would conflict with the land use chapter. However, the fact that there's pre-existing use hinders this argument, as the use is established before the comprehensive plan was written. Economic Development chapter discusses the need for the town to expand its non-residential tax base and shift the burden away from residential property owners. The chapter represents a vision of desired industries being the type that would result in the creation of quality job opportunities and expansion of the tax base while preserving the town's unique character and environment. The Natural Resources chapter identifies the need to protect the town's natural resources, in particular the groundwater aquifer recharge areas. This chapter goes on to explain the town should re-examine its regulations to protect these resources, including soil and earth removal operations, and provide for the restoration of land in a manner that will provide long-term protection. The requested zone change is unique because it proposes the creation of a new zoning district that focuses on a pre-existing non-conforming use, as opposed to requesting a rezoning of an existing zoning designation and approval of an allowed use in that designation. It should be noted that sand, gravel, and quarry businesses were at one time allowed under the town zoning ordinance, and the town amended the ordinance to prohibit the use. This action represents a policy decision by the town that eliminated the ability to establish new quarry businesses. The effect of this action is to make all existing quarries pre-existing non-conforming uses. There are no specific references in the town's comprehensive plan explicitly prohibiting and/or specifically in support of the requested amendment. The plan does include multiple passages related to natural resources and the environment. These passages are presented in this analysis and are primarily focused on protecting the town's natural resources, including groundwater aquifers. The comprehensive plan recommends limiting development through proper zoning regulations to establish compatible land uses which mitigate impacts on the environment. Based on the history of quarrying in the town having been allowed and then prohibited, this request becomes a question of policy. The planning office suggests that the planning board consider forwarding the following conditions to the town council regardless of whether the board makes a positive or negative recommendation regarding the proposed zone change. I think you have the 12 stipulations that the planning office is recommending. These stipulations have been amended since the initial analysis that we provided in February based on the analysis done by GZA and its peer review. And several of their recommendations have been included in these 12 recommendations. If you have any specific questions, I'd be happy to try to address those.
I think we added one tonight, too. About the requirement for the mine and restoration plan.
There was there is a restoration plan here, but I think Mr. Urbano suggested that we address the final grades as possible.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Dr. Bonet?
in consideration, if we do not go forward, the land will never be subject to these 12 conditions that are being proposed. The land is already vulnerable to the landfill site, and it's also vulnerable to the western sand and gravel contamination that's already in the ground. Unless we can put these 12 conditions into effect, the land remains vulnerable to those two contamination sites.
Right.
This gives us an opportunity to have control over the future of that land.
Understanding that tonight we're only making a recommendation, it's going to be up to the council
Yes.
to do that.
Yes.
But yes, I agree.
But that's why I'm saying this, is it makes me inclined to say, we'll give a positive recommendation. Let the council make the ultimate decision, which is theirs to make. But keep in mind that the area is polluted, very close to this site. It has not leaked, fortunately, to the reservoir, from what we all understand. It's being monitored by EPA. With the 12 conditions, the site will be monitored and more closely watched than ever.
Mhm.
And it's a golden opportunity to establish that.
But we can submit a recommendation to the council that includes these stipulations, even if we don't
I understand that.
recommend the overlay
I
itself.
understand that.
Okay,
But I'm explaining my position.
Sure.
Is that we'll have more protection if it goes through.
you're saying with the overlay, it's stronger.
Yes.
Okay.
There were two areas of the comp plan that I had looked at as well. Specifically Section 7 with open space, and there's Goal 2, protecting the town's natural resources while preserving the rural areas. And also Section 8, circulation, where we actually have a policy 3B, confined industrial and commercial growth to the Route 146 corridor. So in that fashion, and also Goal 3 of the circulation, utilize the road system to promote both rural character and economic development. We did hear a lot of neighbors complaining about circulation, trucks, the like, along the proposed routes of the quarry. Mr. Carullo, is there any other stipulations that we could add in? I know they have to carry a bond for maintenance of the road as it exists for their use. Is there any other stipulations that we should think of considering for making sure that the roadways become a little bit more safer, particularly with children in the area, school buses, making sure that we have some level of enforcement of hours of operation, and when those trucks are coming and leaving from the site? Is that something that would be appropriate to allow into the stipulations? If I missed that, I apologize. Okay.
All right, so yeah, that
Yep.
suitability and capacity probably covers it, right? Dr. Roberts, go ahead.
I have a question about whether in the stipulation it would be possible to include something about having some kind of escrow account or something that would help if there should be pollution either to the surrounding wells. I understand from the report that it's sounding that it's more about the like the volume of the water and not it being contaminated, but there's also unknowns. And so I was curious if there was precedent in this field and in these kind of ordinances where there could be some kind of mechanism for having some money be set aside for future problems. And then similarly, I guess this is probably related to the mine plan, but we had talked in previous meetings about whether not only like having all the required stuff like the mesh and the walls and everything, but is there a way to actually restore the land to actually be useful to the community? And I think that's related to the question of what's the end date for when the mine will stop being
That's a
mine.
separate plan, that's a restoration plan.
Yeah.
That's also been mentioned.
Yeah, I know it was mentioned, but it was mentioned more the way I heard it with like making sure the gravel walls
Right,
don't crumble
right,
down.
right.
But it wasn't really focused on like, can it be a
Make the land
resource for the
usable.
community?
Yeah.
So that was one thing. And then the other piece, one quick second.
Yeah,
It-
I think that's a good point on the restoration plan. The restoration plan, to me, can't just be, we're going to put a big fence around it so kids don't get in there and kill themselves, because it still will remain an absolutely unusable piece of land at that point. There should be a way to make the land usable. Otherwise, we haven't gained anything, right? It's not open space, it's just an open hole. And is there a way to put something in the stipulation on the restoration plan that says, with an end result, that it is an acceptably usable piece of property at that point? Understanding that we know we're talking about decades away. But
Excuse me, Chairman, I don't have that section in front of me. I'll see if I can look it up on my phone while we're discussing it, but I think the definition of the restoration plan does address that. In our conversations, the planning office conversations with the applicant, it was clear that we'd be looking for a plan that would make the property usable in the future.
Okay.
Now, with regard to bringing it back to grade, that's obviously, that would be
Doesn't have to
impossible
be,
to happen.
yeah.
But there could be certain elements that would be, at the time that the business is no longer functioning and is no longer useful, that there would be some plantings or there'd be some sort of public access and activity internally within there. That's yet to be determined, but I think the plan would be designed by a registered landscape architect, and we've had those conversations with them, and I'm sorry, I haven't.
But you're saying that's a normal part of the restoration plan?
It is.
Okay.
Okay. And then this is building on what Dr. Benoit was suggesting about having the overlay district could possibly empower us more to hold the company accountable to all these different things. And I was curious if, when you read the peer review, it talks about how complex it is to manage this type of development or business, and how difficult it is for a community to have the correct amount of resources to actually oversee and regulate. And then there's like all levels of regulation with the state regulates some things, EPA regulates others, et cetera. And I was curious, we've talked about this many times, about how our town doesn't have enough staffing to make sure, for example, like that our water isn't being polluted. And we've talked about having an engineer on staff and stuff like that. So I was curious whether there could be an agreement where the applicant would agree to put a certain amount of money from the proceeds that they make from mining the land here to pay for the oversight of what they're doing because it's so complex. And so I wanted to put that out there because I think that's a big part of our problem in this community. We're a very small community, and we are seen, I think, as a target for like various types of land development that are exploitative of the land and end up exploiting people. And thus, we have Superfund sites, et cetera, and we don't have the resources to pull all those things together. And that's when I saw the thing about the mining plan, it just made me wonder if we could have some staff time paid for to actually look at all of those pieces and make sure everything is in its proper place.
Mr. Menard?
I was going to bring up something on that same subject. GSA had recommended that the reports get handed over to the town, and I'm not so sure that the town has a qualified department or person to handle those reports or deal with those reports. So what happens to those reports? They get filed. Yeah, they've submitted their reports as they're supposed to, but nobody knows what it means.
Yeah, I would think it may not be appropriate to go to EPA, but in between is DEM. And it would seem that DEM would be concerned.
We would hope. So
Yeah.
my suggestion was adding to number 10 that upon submitting that report, that the business would pay for a peer review for the town to tell us what that report means and guide us. Because in my opinion, like Mrs. Roberts, we don't have qualified people on our staff to deal with
So
that.
town-selected resource.
Correct.
I think that might be covered by stipulation number 12.
Yeah, it does say, yeah, all reports provided. All right.
I guess I would just want to add, though, if there's a peer review of all the reports, is there also like a so what written up so that it's like, these things aren't in compliance, these things are? Because like when I read this peer review, a lot of them did tell you like what the problems were, but a lot of them were kind of observational and they didn't have a so what associated with them. So it's like, even if the knowledge exists on a piece of paper, if someone isn't making that actionable in some way. And I just want to say from my point of view, I don't even think it's necessarily that we don't have the, like the competence, it's the actual like person hours, because we have so many applications and things to follow up on all the time.
So
Porter?
then, maybe what we say in item 12, that the town may perform third-party peer review of all reports provided by the applicant. Instead of just peer review, we include peer review and recommendations, or peer review and action items that are to be taken to make sure that if there is something out of line, we have a qualified recommendation by a third-party peer review, such as GZA, that says, okay, here's what we found, here's the corrective action that needs to be taken.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I have a different topic, if we can move off that, if we're all done with that one. Mr. Crowell, on the I believe it's just number 2, which talks about the berm and the sound barrier, et cetera. We had some conversations in the last detailed meeting about, and this speaks, I guess, to the mine plan about the dust mitigation, right? And keeping, as Mr. Urbano said, keeping everything on the property. And we had talked about putting up the types of screening that, a sandy gravel place would put in Arizona if it's next to an orange grove, because they have to keep all that from, destroying the grove. So we had talked about that as an option in addition to sound screening, because this is strictly for, they have the mesh that will, I guess it'll stop stuff down to, 0.8 microns, something like that. So very lightweight, but also rather tall, because it's not clear how high we need to go to protect the residents to the south.
In number 3, Mr. Chairman, we're referring to the regulation. It says may include dust control filtration barriers, which is what you're talking about.
How did I miss that?
Or automized
I'm
misters and the
sorry.
like.
You're
So
right, 'cause
we,
it's not in number
actually, you and I had that conversation.
Yeah.
I amended that to include that.
Which
I'm
may
sorry I
include-
didn't point that out to you, but.
All right, no, I appreciate that, I'm sorry, including it. Okay. Yeah. Any other,
I'd like to go back
Mr.
to the
Porter.
restoration plan for a moment, and the GZA recommendations to modify that language a little bit. Can we also include something that says that this restoration plan has to be before council or the planning board for approval? Because right now, the way it's stated is that they just come to they provide a restoration plan, and then that's that. There's no oversight from council, there's no oversight from any administration. Is there language that we could add for that becomes an approval process to go through that?
You could simply add at the end who you want to approve it, to be approved by.
For number 6?
Yeah, in the restoration plan under the ordinance provides that the decision of the building zoning official shall be the final in determining whether a restoration plan shall be put into effect. But that's not in it's in the ordinance, not in, but you could put it in your,
In the
or
stipulation?
if you want to
Okay.
have it go to some board, I guess you could do that.
Okay.
But there is a provision in the ordinance that indicates that a restoration plan is submitted to the building/zoning official.
Okay.
But I think, I think
Right.
you could, I think adding
I
something
think,
stronger.
yeah, I
adding
think
something
we need to
stronger.
have it come to the planning board for review, public hearing, same situations that we have for all of our other stuff that gets going on in town. So I would add to number 6, that it's to be approved by either planning board or by town council. There needs to be some public input for that plan.
Mr. Krill, on all these things, for example, number 5, providing blast vibration monitor, is it implied that it's in perpetuity as long as the business is in operation? Or does it need to be stated?
No, it's, well, if there's a zone change, this would be a very site-specific zone change, right? So- And by statute, the town's allowed to impose conditions on any zone change, and it becomes an inseparable part of that. It's not to the business, it's actually to the property.
Oh, right, I'm sorry, right, okay, okay, great, thank you. Mr. Roberts?
I think I said a little earlier that I was interested in knowing whether there could be some kind of language around having a fund for future harm or impact. And related to that is, I did read in the peer review report that at least one abutter was able to get to arrange having reverse osmosis filtration for their water. So not only for like future problems, but things like wells being cracked, during blasting and things like that. There just seemed like there was a lot of technical just orchestration that has to happen around when the testing happens, how you can prove what happens. And what I'm concerned about is residents being left with like wells that are cracked or foundations that are cracked and no mechanism for helping them, and everyone having to like one by one, take care of this. And I know in the report it talks about a plan for the data having to be like looked at according to certain timelines and everything. And I was having very similar ideas as Dr. Benoit, that if we have this overlay, we can perhaps have something written in there that provides some kind of escrow, like I was saying. I don't know what the mechanism is, so that if people need reverse osmosis water filtration or need to have their foundations repaired or wells dug or whatever it is, that it's there and it's like more easily facilitated. And I say that because the mining operation does take a lot from our community, and it causes a lot of impositions. And I don't know what it gives to our community. The only thing I've asked for was to know what the tax base was, and I haven't found out. So other than extracting from the community and harming the neighbors, I don't know what they're giving to our community. So if they could put money aside for potential harm, I think that would be a useful stipulation.
I think you're talking about a performance bond.
Oh.
Basically what you would
Okay.
require. Then the question is, what is the amount of the bond? Yeah, and yeah, I get insurance and bond, that's what
Okay.
Yeah,
'cause
because
it is more like an insurance, yeah.
it just seems very onerous for anyone to have to prove what's actually happening, considering the timing of everything and the evidence collected. And I just think that's a small thing to ask for the abutters who have to put up with that all the time.
Right. Okay. Is there anything else from the board? Dr. Bernard?
I just have one more thing, which is reading a very brief statement from the Groundwater Protection Committee. I'm a liaison to the Planning Board from the Groundwater Protection Committee, and I'll skip over anything that I already brought up, but I'm wearing, in this moment, my Groundwater Protection Committee chair hat, and I am sharing this on behalf of the committee. Members of the Groundwater Protection Committee are concerned about the following issues pertaining to the quarry operation, and ask that these issues be seriously considered when making decisions about the potential creation of an overlay district. I acknowledge that a number of these concerns are addressed in the GZA peer review report. These are the few highlights. The quarry's proximity to the two Superfund sites, its location over the water supply overlay district, past history of the quarry in terms of being a responsible neighbor and compliant member of the community as a business, the impact of the quarry on residents' ability to protect the integrity of their drinking water for their families, the level of technical expertise and time needed for a professional to review, monitor, and hold the quarry operation accountable to the regulations and standards is vast and exceeds the current resources of our community. What is the current ability of the owner-operator to address potential pollution of the groundwater should contamination occur? Is there a way to hold funds in escrow in case such an event happens? And I believe this is the last one. Is there a provision for residents whose wells and water quality are impacted to receive something such as a reverse osmosis filtration and other remediation, such as having wells repaired? And we already discussed that in terms of the performance bond, and that's it. And thank you for hearing these concerns from the Groundwater Protection Committee.
Okay, thank you. And CJ, for future meetings, could we get a ground strap for Mr. Carullo or something to somehow keep that intense electrical charge he has from taking out the microphone? It only happens on your seat. Only happens right there. Yeah. All right. So are we? Okay. Yeah, for 5 minutes. Talk amongst yourselves. Okay, we're back. While we're not opening a formal public hearing, we're going to allow for, if there are people who would like to come up to the podium, make some comments, whatever, that's fine. I'll just ask you to keep them brief. Again, if you come up, say something, if you're the next person up, don't repeat what somebody before you said, just say, oh, I agree with that too. Great, and move on, okay? That's all I'll ask. So, with that, whoever would like to? Sure.
Bill Landry, representing the applicant. Thank you for all of that thoughtful discussion. Before I forget to mention this, I would like to make a request at the beginning that the materials that GZA reviewed in connection with their peer review, the YouTube videos and the materials that were given to GZA be incorporated.
Do we need to stop? Mr. Igliozzi, are we required to stop when we lose our sound?
Should
Because it's
give
public,
people a chance to watch
for-
the,
for
hear
open.
what's going on.
for open.
I mean, if this is going to be
If we
a
could
problem that's
pause, please.
permanent, CJ? Is this going to be a problem that's permanent for the night? Okay, then
All right, so we'll continue. Thank you.
Thank you. I just ask that those materials be made part of the record of this proceeding,
Mhm.
whatever was given to GZA, most of which was the testimony that this board heard, but it wasn't completely coextensive with what was presented at the town council. I'd like to just remind the board, you know, what our thrust was here. We were never coming in for a permit to establish this operation or to continue to operate it. It's a 70-year-old situation. It will go on for a long time with a plan or without a plan. Some people disagree on how far out it can go, but there's an awful lot of gray area and an awful lot of additional area that can be expanded, as well as depths that can be explored within areas that have been mined for decades. So the likelihood that this black hole here will cease to be a black hole on its own from every perspective is very low. We didn't come here for permission. We came here to try to establish a planning approach to this property, which has had anything but planning on both sides, the owner's side and the town side. There's been no cooperation on planning this site ever. And it's been in litigation for 30 years, which has accomplished nothing so far. There's no silica dust control plan. There's no mining plan. There's no restoration plan. There's no 12 points that we feel are good starts for the discussion at the town council, along with most of what's been mentioned tonight by all of you. Our request, we love to hear the word plan so much, because that's exactly what we're encouraging everybody to do along with us and want to continue to participate in. You know, the references to the comp plan and existing zoning, nobody's going to have any residential agricultural estates on this property for 3 more comprehensive plan sequences of 10 years. You can put anything in the comprehensive plan about what the town aspires to do if it were possible, but it's not going to make any difference if it's in the plan, if it's not feasible to be carried out. All of the conservation aspirations of the plan for this property, to protect the groundwater, protect the reservoir, protect the neighbors, All of them can be accomplished through this mechanism that we've suggested. This is the way to carry out the feasible goals of the comprehensive plan, not to just leave it in a black hole where the developer decides where the next hole is going to be dug. It's a responsible developer. It is a planning process that we'd like to see come to conclusion. It was very well intentioned. Everything that's been put on the table here is on the table. Honestly, it is. We don't necessarily agree word for word with all of the 12 factors, and I won't take the time to go through each one, but they're a very, very respectable, constructive start. Every single one of them is. We may not be able to do 200 feet everywhere. It may be impossible to have a 100-foot buffer within the 200 feet. There's no 200 feet there now in some spaces. So our preference at the council level will be to have the buffer really focus on the neighboring property owners, as opposed to areas where it really presents even less of a risk there. But buffering, screening, significant, all of these things are worthy of discussion through whatever mechanism the council, chooses to adopt to get there. We presented the experts before we addressed all of the points, because we felt that you needed to know how dangerous this site really was. There's a lot of hyperbole. There are a lot of statements that were made, of course, and we knew that it would be very, very difficult for you to embrace this idea without a better understanding of what the real situation is out there with respect to blasting, with respect to groundwater, with respect to dust control, silica, where we stand in relation to the standards, how they're controlled, how safe it is, whether our experts are to be believed. And they're engineers. They have a duty to the profession and the state and themselves to play it straight here, and they did, and they're all highly qualified people. And we didn't pick the peer review. We left that up to the town. We did agree to pay for it, and we're very happy that somebody was going to be peer reviewing this. And it took a long time. The town picked a firm that's at the top of the list of people who really understand this. And that report was a very emphatic affirmation of what the experts had to say. And we're not patting ourselves on the back because we believed what they were saying, and the peer reviewer believed what they were saying. Now, he supplemented it with a few other things. You've got to pay attention to how low you go. You've got to pay attention to what the restoration plan looks like. All of these things could result in a problem if they're not monitored rock to rock as the mining process proceeds under this diminishing assets rule that says that this use can continue to expand. Every time a bucket goes in the ground, it's an expansion. That's not something that applies to gas stations and other non-conforming uses. It's the rule in this state and other states about diminishing assets that it's a constant expansion. So what it requires is a planning and control process to see what the risk is as that work proceeds. And that is what my client's plan is all about. That's all it's ever been about. Monitoring, benching, evaluating risk. It's doing the things you know have to be done in the short term that have not been done and haven't been monitored, sharing all of the data, helping in the process of financing the review of it so that the applicant's not running over the town with a big job that the town has to do and has no resources. Eventual reclamation, the town could own this property and have it be a park or something at some point after it's been mined, and there should be controls along those lines. That's what we do on new solar projects. There's no reason that can't be part of this plan to have some controls. But if everything stays the way it is, I won't be here for 30 more years, and most of us won't be, but the trajectory of this whole site, this whole issue is not likely to get any better than it's been for the last 30 years, unless this opportunity is pursued. And we promise to continue to do it in good faith. We haven't rushed you. We have paid for everything. We've welcomed opposing views and peer review, and that's what we're going to continue to do. So we encourage you and hope that you'll see fit to recommend to the council that there's merit in continuing to plan, as opposed to walking away from the subject matter and letting things develop on their own. And thank you for all the time that you're putting into this.
Thank you, Ms. Lynn. Who's next?
Rebecca DeCristofaro, 1931 Pound Hill Road. Bear with me. I have a hard time breathing and talking. I'm 8 months pregnant. I'm speaking as an abutter to the Pine Hill Road quarry. I have a few things that I'd like to say in relation to the comprehensive plan, and I just wanted to start with Mr. Landry respectfully. Your point that this quarry will go on with or without a plan, I think, continues to inflame negative sentiment among residents. It sounds more like a threat than it does an olive branch. So I would just say maybe moving forward, it seems as though just when I feel like there could be any headway made, as we're sitting here and we're talking about comprehensive plan and potential, is this off? Oh.
I just want you to maintain.
To look at you, sorry.
Focus on.
And, you know, the potential to discuss conditions that will not only benefit potentially the business, but also the residents. It just leads me to believe that there's still concern there that this business is going to continue to operate with or without, you know, conditions or a plan. A few points. As an abutter, I will say this. I am not up here to make a recommendation on whether or not you should consider the overlay district in relation to this business. I only feel comfortable speaking about my experience as an abutter and what I would feel like I need to be comfortable in living next to a quarry. Obviously, living next to a quarry is not an ideal situation. In retrospect, I probably wouldn't have purchased my property had I known the extent of this operation there, but that is neither here nor there, and I am at this property, and I love this town, so I will stay. So in order for me to live there comfortably, I saw in the comprehensive plan that there was proposed buffer of 200 feet, but with vegetation only at 100. I am absolutely positively not comfortable with that.
It doesn't say vegetation only. It also says sound barrier and
I didn't read that. I read
other types of screening. Is that, I forgot the wording there.
I read vegetation would only, you'd only require vegetation for 100 feet within the 200 feet.
Right, but that's item 2. Item 3, as Mr. Carullo pointed out that I missed, also talks about screening, which is for the dust mitigation. That's in addition to the 100-foot screening. I just want to make sure that it's clear.
Right, but I think the issue is that I don't think 100 feet of vegetation, maybe it's 150 feet of vegetation with the buffer, but I'm not necessarily comfortable with the mining business coming any closer than 200 to 150 feet. And that's not even like, I don't have any experience to really inform that, but I know that maybe I would need to see what this berm and buffer and screening situation looks like in order to say at what distance I'm comfortable. On a windy day, it's very, very loud. It sounds like it's in your backyard. On a windy day, also the degree of dust that comes through the trees is concerning. So anything that we could do, like any more distance that we can keep between us and the business in order to mitigate the dust and the sound, I think would be completely, would be ideal. The other thing that I think we need to consider based on GZA's peer review is the depth below the water table. Will a study be completed in order to understand at 50 feet it might have this impact, at 100 feet it might have this impact. Like that, I think the mine plan needs to be really specific on the depth that they can essentially mine in order to ensure that we're not impacting water level, like water tables. And I think that needs to be informed by a consultant, or this hydrogeologic consultant. So I would say, in addition to what the comprehensive plan states about the hydrogeologic consultant, if that could also be added, to the assessment.
Mr. Grillo, would that be a normal part of the mine plan to include that assessment at various depths?
I would defer to Mr. Urbano on that.
Yeah, the mine plan should tell you what depth they're gonna go to, and with that information, the hydrologic consultant can evaluate basically what the deeper you go, the more further you wanna be away from the closest water supply well.
So that would be,
Identify where the water supply wells are, and then they can work.
so that'd be part of the planning before they start going to determine and maybe even affect how deep they go based on what they learn.
Right.
And
Okay.
there'll be monitoring, like, one of the things is putting a monitoring well, so one is looking at it and seeing if it makes sense, the other two would be putting a monitoring well in to basically see if there is response.
Gotcha.
So the water table's gonna go up and down, but it's gonna, but it's be able to see if it's affecting it significantly, and then you can have to make, corrections to the.
Okay, so that would be part of the,
So like in
That
theory,
would be
this
part of the mine plan.
hydrologic consultant would be able to inform the mine plan by saying,
Yes.
based on this
Yes.
depth, it would impact X, Y, and Z.
right.
Okay. I also really appreciate the suggestion for staff or some sort of regular review to oversee regulations and compliance with the mine plan. I think it's kind of easy to infer that the reason why we're here today is because there really has been that lack of oversight for the last 30-some-odd years, as well as the performance bond and insurance. I know that I mentioned this before. Given some of the increased blasting over the last few years, everybody thinks that I'm crazy, but I've done some research to understand the implications it can have on a roof, and my roof has been leaking substantially over the last 2 years, so much so that I had to file an insurance claim in order to get my whole roof redone, and the payout wasn't even enough money to actually complete the work that needs to get done. And I can't hire a lawyer to prove that it was as a result of blasting. So with that being said, I think having that sort of mitigation bond or performance bond for future issues, I think would be very much appreciated by residents. And then lastly, again, not necessarily in relation to this business, I have concern regarding the approval of this overlay for one reason specifically. And I got chastised when I said this last time, but I think that there is some degree of truth here or potential. My fear is that approving an overlay would allow for precedent. And when I say that, what I mean by that is if another developer comes into town and sees that an overlay for mining has been allowed for a business, could they try to replicate that or use this as an argument to pursue an overlay for their specific property? And I can't recall what town we're seeing this in now. I think it was in Valley Breeze or NRI now. I don't know if it was Smithfield or Barraville. But a developer purchased a piece of property and they're actually going to be able to mine that property for the next 10 years before they even put in housing. I mean, that's my concern for this town, is that if we allow for it once, it may be allowed for or have to be allowed for in the future. Like, I don't know the legal ground there, but if we allow for this situation, are we potentially opening up the door for future situations? And then lastly, I would also like to say this. Over the last few months, this business has been respectful. I think I've at least noticed that I haven't heard of their operations starting up at 6:30 like they used to. I think that they have been a little bit more respectful of the residents' concerns. I did have the opportunity to sit down as an abutter All the butters were given the opportunity to sit down with Mr. Plunkett and express what concerns they had as the butters. They were incredibly receptive to what I said. So I did really appreciate that. But it's, again, Mr. Landry's comment that with or without a plan, we're going to operate anyway. That kind of makes me feel as though I'm concerned about smoke and mirrors here. So again, I want what's best for this town. I obviously want to preserve my property, my quality of life, my family's quality of life. And I think that you have all of the information to make informed decisions.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Who's next? Anybody else wish to speak? No? I'm going to ask Mr. Actually, just before I go, could I ask you, Mr. Urbano, to come up just to readdress the dust mitigation and what the options are there? Because I mean, we heard now, Ms. DiCristofaro, and we've heard it in the past number of times, and it still seems a little more gray than some of the other stuff, which seems fairly cut and dry.
Yes. Yeah, as I said, just there's best management practices that are used to basically for dust control, and that's what they'd be implementing, and they can modify those things to make them.
Oh, so that's actually been discussed with them? That's
No, that's what, I mean, that, a dust control thing is landfills, or, you know, it's a very common thing, is, you know, dust control plans. And as I said, adding water is usually the thing that keeps the dust down, and depending how dry it is and how windy it is, you know, that would be the.
Right, but in the end, the wind blows stuff, so yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, so
All
they
right.
have to have some type of thing.
All right,
and, yeah,
appreciate that.
okay, it'd have to be an evolving plan, basically. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Sir? Oh, okay. Yes, sir.
Good evening. Bob Ferrari. I presented before you previously. I'm a professional engineer, and I'm a consultant to Material Sand regarding the quarry operations as well as their other facilities. I want to just add a few comments here, folks. And by the way, I want to thank Tony and GZA. I thought they did an excellent peer review. And I'm not saying that because they substantially agreed with our findings, but because I've known Tony for probably 30 years, and I've worked with GZA intermittently for 30 years, and you couldn't have hired a better peer review consultant. And one of the best parts of the peer review, and this is a critique I have of people who do peer reviews, is that they didn't just say we agree or disagree. They explained why, and they gave you a lot of backup information. That's a real peer review, okay? So you got a really good job done on that, okay? Whether you agree with me or not, you got a really good job done. I understand the concerns of the town. I understand the concerns of the neighbors. I want to point a few things out just to I want to reinforce a few things. In that there's concerns, for example, over groundwater contamination. And I think this is a key issue. Please understand something, and I stated this, I think it was last February or thereabouts when I made a previous presentation on this site. You already have significant and severe groundwater contamination. This site is bracketed between two Superfund sites, Wilson's Landfill and Resource Recovery to the east, and you've got Western Sand and Gravel to the west. Immediately to the west, I mean, it's over the fence, on the other side of the perimeter fence. The worst possible thing that could happen to this quarry is to have contaminate the materials they're extracting. Okay. That's the worst possible thing. The last thing the owner wants to do here is have something happen on site that would create potential contamination or create conditions that would bring contaminants from off-site onto this property, which would contaminate these materials. You may or may not be aware of it, but this site has certain of their grade of some of their construction materials. It's the only site in Rhode Island that has certain Rhode Island DOT approvals to use their material. They don't want to lose that, okay? This site has been responsible. The drainage control program implemented on this site has been, because I think one of the board members asked earlier, what benefit does the town get from this site? Well, here's a benefit you get from this site on environmental issues. The drainage plan on the site, it's a zero surface water discharge site. Any water generated on the site, stormwater or groundwater, it's pumped to their infiltration basins. The discharge from those basins maintains the plume remediation under the Western Sand and Gravel site. That has been a major factor in maintaining that contaminant plume going in the direction it's supposed to be going, okay? If you look at and I've looked at 28 years of groundwater monitoring, okay, for that plume. EPA developed a remediation plan called natural attenuation, and it was basically traveling generally northward, roughly under Tarkillen Brook, straight up towards Upper Slatersville Reservoir. If you look at the monitoring data, the boundary on the east side of that plume is dead straight. If you look at the plume on the west side of that plume, it's not quite straight. It's kind of wandering around a little bit, okay? But the good news is the plan is on or ahead of schedule and it's doing its job. The hydrology of this quarry site is a major factor because it's a blocking water. It's been maintained. It's not having an adverse impact. And I can assure you, the quarry and the owner of this site want to continue that because the last thing they want is to have that plume migrate onto their site because that'll create major problems. Tony's absolutely correct. The deeper you go with the quarry, particularly this is on the eastern end of the quarry, could it have an adverse impact or some impact relative to the drainage, you know, the contaminant plume drainage from Wilson's? The contaminant there, and again, this has been monitored for decades, it's going generally east-northeast. It ends up basically following Trout Brook to lower Slatersville Reservoir. We want to maintain that. The good news is that geology and hydrogeology is very favorable to maintain that. Some of the conditions of suggested conditions of approval, and these are things that we've been discussing and reviewing for quite a long time, is to do some monitoring on that side, to be sure. I think Tony made some good recommendations in that respect. And he and I discussed this extensively. So this site has been operating in a very responsible manner, despite what some people may think. For example, they, on their own volition, put in those infiltration ponds because they didn't want to have a surface water discharge off the site. And they've expanded that system periodically when they've needed to. As the quarry operation expanded and they produced more, they captured more stormwater that had to be pumped over and infiltrated, just as an example. When they recognized that they might have, under a worst-case storm condition that occurred in late 2023 and into 2024, they had a couple of little minor defects in the berms. They doubled the width of those containment berms. And there is one little error in Tony's report. The berm has never been overtopped. It's never had an overflow. They had a couple of minor defects and some water went through, but it didn't overtop the berms. Things like dust control. I've been on that site, I can't tell you how many times in the last 7 or 8 years. I have never been on that site, including in rain events, when they haven't had their dust control operation go, their water spray going. Okay, that's very important, as you can imagine, for fugitive dust control. And it's also very important for protection, not only of the neighbors, but of their own staff on site. And as recently as a week or two ago, they actually had a mine safety, the Mine Safety and Health Administration came in and did silica dust exposure monitoring on the site. And they monitored 5 of their staff members doing different functions on the site. Okay, just for what it's worth, they came back with 100% clean bill of health on that. No adverse issues. Okay, another consideration. And again, this is done without any. This isn't done at the request of a regulatory agency. This is again noted in the peer review report. Typical protocols, when you're doing blasting, you put out 1 to 3 seismographs on neighboring properties. The minimum requirement, of course, is 1. You put it between the blast site and the nearest building, okay, nearest potentially affected building. Now, Rick Roll, who is a very highly qualified seismologist and he's a professional geologist, has been doing this work for 20 years. Rick uses up to 10 seismographs. As it said in the peer review report, that's established a new standard of care for the industry, okay? That's done voluntarily, okay? It's been, and for 20 years, since they started blasting. No regulatory agency came in and said, you've got to do X, Y, and Z. They just do that, and I can assure you it costs the site more money. They design their blast charges very specifically to minimize adverse impacts. They want to get the blast done precisely for a certain amount of material with minimum adverse impacts, okay? And that's been done every time, every single blast, and that blast is monitored by up to 10 seismographs on neighboring properties, okay? Because they want to be sure. And the results of that monitoring, and Rick can elaborate more because this is his area of expertise, the vibration monitoring is 2 orders of magnitude below what the defined risk levels or damage levels would be by mine safety and the Bureau of Mines. Okay, they came out over 40 years ago with their criteria as far as standards for blasting and for vibration and blast vibration and control of blast vibration. So there's many things they've been doing, and voluntarily. Okay, we went ahead when they did the infiltration ponds. We're the ones who went ahead and said, let's get this basically permitted, if you will, with RAL and DEM, okay? We were one of the first zero discharge sites in the DEM program. They are subject to inspections, and it's at the absolute discretion and will of DEM. They've had any number of inspections out there from various regulatory agencies. This site is very highly regulated. They have DEM coming out there. They have OSHA. They can have the fire marshal, state fire marshal coming out there to do inspections. They can have mine safety coming out there. They can have an incredible array of regulatory authorities coming out there. They have to have their documentation lined up. It's got to be explicit. Yes, they have to do filings. They have 20 years of blast records been sent to the fire marshal's office. I can't tell you what the fire marshal does with them, but they've done the appropriate filings. And every one of those blasts has been within the established criteria to minimize any adverse impact on neighbors, let alone off-site, let alone anything on-site, okay? There are structures on-site also, so they don't want to damage. As far as neighboring wells are concerned, and it was mentioned how one of the neighbors has a reverse osmosis system. That wasn't done under any regulatory directive. The owner of that house came to Bobby Pezza and said, geez, I'm having some water quality problems. Don't really know if it's due to the quarry operations. Mr. Pezza voluntarily did that, okay? Right? That was worked out between him and the neighbor. It had nothing to do with any regulatory agency, nothing to do with me. That's one of the areas of expertise we have is water supply. He just did it voluntarily, okay? He's tried to be a good neighbor. He's limited his hours of operation, has had good entrance control. Yes, he's got to have trucks going up and down. That's the access. He's got one access into his site. That's what he's got to use for his trucks. So I'm just trying to point some things out here that this isn't some wildcat, out of control operation doing whatever it pleases. He's been operating. This site has been getting operated for over 60 years as a quarry site. Most of the site is burned. Okay? And by the way, if you go to his other sites, they're burned also. Okay? And that's good for drainage control. So he did that. And you can look at the aerial photography. Those berms were initially established back in the 1960s. Okay, and they've been improved upon and improved upon and improved upon as recently as this past year. Okay. So I'm just trying to point this out that I believe this site has been a good neighbor. They've been operating in a responsible manner. I wouldn't say that if I didn't believe it. And by the way, I am subject to a very strict code of professional ethics as a registered professional engineer, among other things. And I wouldn't make that representation if I couldn't demonstrate it and prove it. Okay. So I just want to offer that. And our team is available virtually at any time to answer questions, address issues, whatever the needs are. And as Mr. Landry said, and this is not a threat, okay? Mr. Landry was stating the obvious. This site has been operating with no plan in place for many decades, okay? This is the collective opportunity for the town and the owner and the operation to develop a set of reasonable and realistic boundary conditions to try and address everyone's concerns and issues, okay? Including the site ownership's concerns and issues. Everybody stands to gain from this if it's done in a fair and reasonable manner. So that's what I have to say. So thanks very much.
Thank you
Appreciate
very
it.
much. You want a second bite of the apple? Is that what you're saying? If it's quick, as quickly as you can get there.
Rebecca DeCristofaro, 1931 Pound Hill Road. As far as fugitive dust, I of course appreciate that they ensure that their workers are wearing the appropriate equipment in order to mitigate any exposure. It's not, and I have noticed that they have been watering the roads a lot more. Like I always see the stream of water coming down Pine Hill, down Pound Hill Road, and it ends up draining right into my drainage. So they are watering Monday through, I think, Friday. I don't necessarily always pay attention on Saturdays because they don't have regular operations on Saturdays. I don't necessarily know to what degree they're watering inside of the quarry, but on a Sunday, nobody's there to do water or water to ensure that there's no dust leaving the property. It's on a really windy day when you can just see sheets of dust coming through the tree line into our property. Like, that's what concerns me, is the dust that's able to leave the property because there's no existing screening devices or whatnot up. So I realize that they do have dewatering protocol, or watering protocol rather, to mitigate the dust. But that's not necessarily enough to mitigate the fugitive dust that does leave the property, whether they're operating or not. So I think that still needs to be something that's definitely addressed.
Okay.
Okay.
Good. Thank you.
Ryan Hurley, I represent the applicant. I do want to just present this to the town since this has come up now a couple of times. This is the email that the applicant received today from Mine Safety reporting, sending in his report showing no negative results.
Does it address on days they're not operational? And how dust is made? But the point that was just made is about when they're not there to operate, they're spraying and all that.
And when the crushing is not happening, dust isn't really happening. So, other than natural dust does exist everywhere. Dust comes onto my property. So, in addition, this is the prior testimony. And this is available for everyone. This is part of this is a little separate incorporating that.
So she will be in the public record.
Brian, may I go for the file?
Along with the report for mine safety. There's a few of those as well. I think what I'd like to just kind of echo a little bit what was said by Mr. Landry and Mr. Ferrari, this is a planning issue. These are a very highly regulated operation, and it has always been. This isn't just that all of a sudden in the last year, when we've come before this board and in front of town council, that all of a sudden we've started going to these other agencies. That had been going on for many, many years. Mr. Grohl and Mr. Ferrari have been working with this operation and this company for many, many years, decades. What the problem was when the town started fielding a lot of complaints a couple of years ago, the town didn't know what was going on because there's no planning for this site. It is screaming and begging for planning, and that's what we're offering. That's what the court came and said, figure this out, go in front of the town, and put together a plan in which you can provide the town the opportunity to have planning. So you guys can know what's going on with EPA, and what is going on with RIDEM, and what is going on with mine safety, and what is going on with OSHA, okay? Where we are presenting all of our data and plans and dust control issues to these other agencies, but the town didn't have access to it. They didn't even know what was going on, right? That they couldn't respond to these complaints. And when we first came here, there was an enormous amount of public safety concerns, that this quarry was a safety hazard. And I think throughout this whole year, from the testimony from Mr. Ferrari and from Mr. Grohl and from Mr. Hammond, who's not here today, but he was the mine safety expert, and then that was all supported by GZA without exception, that this is not a public safety hazard. In fact, it actually, as Mr. Ferrari just pointed out, is a benefit in that it is actually pushing the plume away into where EPA wants it to go. It's actually a barrier keeping it away from the residential properties and letting it naturally go to where EPA wants to go and get out of the system. So I think what we are offering is what the town really needs here. It needs a plan. Okay, this is an opportunity for the town to put in a plan with the 12 recommendations that have been set forth, and those are almost very similar to what is actually in the amendment. The text amendment has a lot of these things put into it. You know, the detail of which, you know, can be worked out a little bit more, but the reality is this is going to give the town the opportunity to respond to complaints. If there are changes, to have the ability to go about and make any changes if anything were to ever happen, right? But have the understanding of what's going on that property. And that's the essential need of planning, and that's what the site needs. And so I think that's the benefit of what we're offering here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I can honestly say I've never heard the word plan used more at a planning board meeting in my life. Fortunately, it's what we do, so it's that's great. Anybody else? No? Oh, of course.
Carol Drainville from 750 Pound Hill Road. I'm on the Groundwater Protection Committee. I have been concerned about the silica problem, and listening here tonight, I still worry that the way they determine whether there is a problem is basically by what's happening, and I think I've heard this before, so I'm reiterating it, what's happening within the quarry. They're not, so if the quarry, and Mr. Hammond said the same thing because he was a mine expert, and he tested quarry workers and determined whether the quarry, the silica, they were affected by the silica. But if you're in a residential area abutting, how do you determine that nothing is leaving the quarry, because the quarry workers are equipped, and it's the mine owners who have to supply them with equipment, with gear, and they use water as they're blasting, I would guess. We asked, and Mr. Hammond was asked at the time what they were using at the site when they blast, and he said, well, I'm never there when they blast. So I think it's the town should be more, have more information about how this residential area is going to be protected, because there are sites all over Rhode Island that have not been protected and people have been affected, and the residents can't be collateral damage.
Thank you. All right. If there's nothing else, I do have, I don't know if the planning board has anything else. I have one comment to make on one of the stipulations. Dr. Benoit?
I'd like to raise a question, and any of the experts in the audience. We know that we can collect pollen and determine if it's ragweed, milkweed, or goldenrod. Are there filters that could be we put out in the field to determine if it's silica or if it's other types of contaminants in the air?
Looks like we have someone answer your question.
Fortunately, we have an expert.
Richard J. Grohl, Technical Services out of Hollis, New Hampshire. I'm here in regard to issues of blasting, noise, vibration, dust, all the things that you can attribute to, the sensations you contribute to excavation. As far as the dust is concerned, the breathable dust is a very, very small particle of dust. You don't see it. They're measuring for that kind of particle of dust. They're not getting it in there. The visible dust that you see coming out is not what they're measuring for, and you can't breathe it. Your body just can't get in all the way to what they call the alveoli, which are very small air exchange sacs that take the oxygen, put it into your body, and take carbon dioxide and expel it. The particulate matter that can make it that far into your body is measured as anything below 4 microns. And visible dust is never smaller than about, I know it's much more than 4 microns. You cannot see 4 microns. They use what's known as a electron microscope to see such a small particle. So it's nothing that you have to worry about breathing if it's visible. As far as the screening that they're going to be using, these screens, what they do is they do not necessarily filter dust. What they do is they take dust out of suspension. Laminar flow in a fluid has the greatest potential to keep suspended solids in the matrix. Whereas if the fluid is turbulent, its net velocity is dropped, because in a laminar flow, you go from here to here directly. The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. In turbulent flow, it does this. And the net time that it takes to get from here to here is substantially greater. Okay. So what they're doing is they are erasing the laminar flow that comes off of the site, and they're replacing it with a turbulence barrier that causes the material to come out of suspension, because the energy that it would take to keep the material in suspension is being dissipated in the form of heat against the individual molecules of air that are bouncing against each other, instead of moving in sympathy with each other's in one direction. Okay. And that was it.
Great. Thank you.
So, I may not be as well educated as that. Was that a simple yes or no that to Dr. Benoit's question, if they could determine what the dust is coming from the site? I just need a yes or no.
Yes, yes. And what
Okay.
they do is they put the mineral matter on Plat and Plat.
Okay.
And they emulsion the oils, and they use the light characteristics of individual particles to determine its mineralogy. Every mineral has its own refractive index or sets of refractive indexes, which is the means by which the light is bent as it transmits from air into the mineral. Different minerals have different
Okay, thank you.
So anything else on the board, or just one of the stipulations? I'll let you go first.
Okay, yeah, I was curious if we were definitely adding the stipulation about the performance bond. Did that definitely get added?
Well, I wrote one down. It's going to be the board's prerogative whether they want to approve it, but
Okay.
do we want to
and-
go over this? I have a few.
Actually, if I could just, I'd like to comment on the first one. Based on one of the things that Mr. Landry said, which I thought was very helpful, as he pointed out, the land is at a point now where there may not be 200 feet for the setback, and in the last few words are, where sufficient land remains available.
Correct.
It doesn't address what happens when sufficient land is not available. And I think it should be very clear on what happens. If there isn't 200 feet, what happens? Do we say, therefore, it stops wherever it is because it's within the 200 feet? Or we need to put something there because that creates a gray area.
That would be the desire of the board.
Thoughts from the planning board on that?
No, I agree.
But what would you agree to be the wording? That it just stops wherever it is?
I would say if there's existing land that resides within the 200 feet setback, that is the definitive one.
And if they're no longer,
If they're beyond the 200 feet, or within the 200 feet, there's no going further.
no going further, got it, right. So here it is, okay. So, Mr. Carrillo, could you turn that into some addition, where sufficient land is not available, then no further expansion or whatever is allowed or whatever's the right way to say that.
The other one I'm just curious about is that whole like data to action thing. So it's like there's a plan and there's all these regulations that get reviewed and all these papers that are filed. But,
that was the one with the-
Jeff like clarified.
Yeah, it's item 12.
Right, and so I was saying I would like to have some staff time or consultant time to pay for someone with the time and the expertise to analyze all of that and make it actionable, not just like, yes, it's filed, but like the so what part. And I feel like and then Jeff kind of expanded on that, and I feel like there was it seemed like people liked that idea, people on this board.
Yep.
So I wanted to know whether we're going to have something along those lines in there.
That's added to item 12.
Yeah, it's not only the peer review, but like how is it utilized?
Yeah, we did talk about having action items based on the peer review, I think is the phrase I heard.
I simply added and recommendations after the word review.
Oh, and recommendations, okay. Yeah.
Mm.
So that's a recommendation to peer reviewer on what actions need to be taken.
My other thing is just that about like actually managing it, like not just the action, because our town just doesn't have, we always talk about how our town does not have the person hours to manage a lot of the things that we have. So I guess I would ask Mr. Carullo, do you think that in addition to doing the peer review and having action items, we need paid time for someone to actually like look at all of that and, you know, like basically the business would help us do the job that we have to do because they exist in our town. But maybe you think we already have enough capacity to do that.
I'm not sure what you're asking.
Well, we've said over the years, like, for example, in the Groundwater Protection Committee, that it would be great if we had some engineer hours, like, on staff for our town, because we're a rural community and we have different businesses coming in doing various things. So I was thinking, like, maybe it could be like a 0.2 FTE of an engineer or something
Well,
like that. Like,
the town currently, and I don't know what will be the condition in the future, has agreements with 3 engineering firms. GZA is one of them. I think Parr is another one, and Crossman Engineering. And they're available to the town on project as needed basis. And, for example, if the peer review is going to be GZA, they would review the documents, they would provide recommendations to the town, and then it's up to the town to enforce.
I mean, in the majority of cases, the recommendations are gonna be something the business needs to do, in which case obviously there'll be absorbing cost. If there, and I guess what you're saying, if we needed engineering resource to oversee it or whatever, that would be for the town council to decide.
Well, I think that's covered under number 12, to be honest with you.
Right, okay.
Okay, thank you.
And then those recommendations,
right.
if there's things that are found within reports.
Right.
That fall under the purview of the zoning official, like if there's
That's
then
their responsibility
that's
to
gonna be their
enforce. They have to take
responsibility too.
enforcement action.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So,
Question, I'm sorry, this is about the 2 monitoring wells that were mentioned in the peer review report. Are those 2 monitoring wells part of the mine plan, or are they a different item? They talked about monitoring wells for the EPA, near the EPA Superfund sites.
I think number 9 addresses the monitoring wells. The hydraulic consultant to evaluate potential impact of dewatering for monitoring well near the north
Okay.
area.
right.
Okay, thanks, just making sure.
Okay. All right. So we're done, make a motion. So the motion away.
I'm going to make a motion to present a positive recommendation to the town council based on the professional report from GZA and with no counter-professional information to counteract what was presented to us. And with all the conditions that have been enumerated this evening, from 1 to 12, and any additional that have been added.
Yeah, if the board doesn't mind, I'll read what could be condition number 13, that the applicant shall provide adequate liability insurance and/or performance bond for potential damages to abutting residences for relevant risks, set amount to be determined by the town council.
As is stated, yes.
Could you read the proposed language for the addition to stipulation number 1?
I used your language, Mr. Chairman.
That's what I'm concerned about. I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night, so I don't know.
It says that the use shall maintain minimum setbacks of 200 feet from any abutting residential property line, district or zone where sufficient land remains available. Where sufficient land is not available, no further activity shall occur.
Excellent. I couldn't have said it better myself. So we have a motion with a bunch of things added onto it. Do I have a second? We have a motion for a positive recommendation with everything else that was said. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second from Mr. Benoit. Let's do a roll call vote. Dr. Benoit?
Yes.
Dr. Roberts? Mr. Porter?
No.
Mr. Menard?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Dr. Roberts made, no.
Yes.
She said yes. Yes, so yes, yes, no, yes, yes. So anything further we need to do with this, Mr. Carrillo, Mr. Ugliozzi?
No, that's it.
Okay.
Did you act on did you make any decision on the comprehensive plan, or was that in the
That
plan?
Mr. Benoit made a positive recommendation to the.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, it was
What-
positive.
Even with the positive recommendation, do we need to vote on consistency with comp plan? Because that wasn't part of the motion?
That was,
My question. That was my question.
But if we're,
If you're making a positive recommendation, you're finding it consistent with the comprehensive plan, and I'm assuming you're going with the recommendation of the planner.
Question, I think.
Probably wouldn't hurt to
Yeah.
make sure we're including that language that we
Include
do.
the planner's finding as to the comprehensive plan. That's kind of, you referenced the 13 conditions, but you didn't reference his
Oh, I see.
findings.
Right.
So, again, we just wanted to be clear for the council that you're pointing to those.
yeah,
Yep.
So maybe a motion for that effect.
okay. Oh, so we need to have a motion to amend the,
No.
oh, just to adopt the findings.
Mr. Chairman, with no further business before us, I move we adjourn.
You know, we actually need the motion
Oh.
to include
I apologize.
the planning office's findings on the comprehensive plan.
Why don't we just make allow Mr. Benoit to amend his motion to include the planning department's findings?
Okay, I'll make a motion to amend my motion.
Okay.
Then a second and just
Yeah.
revote.
And we have a second? And we'll revote?
Yes.
Dr. Benoit? Roberts? Porter? No. Ms. Menard?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. So same vote as last time.
Yes.
And now,
Now, Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
we have a motion to adjourn. And we have a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned at 9:21. Thank you all.